My house sits on a 1 acre lot, most of which is grass that needs to be mowed, and I've been mowing it since I was old enough to use the mower. Because it's such a chore, 10 years ago I bought a commercial mower to speed things up. That cut the job from about 3 hours down to 1.5. Even so, that's 45 hours a year on the mower. I asked myself, am I contributing to the greater good by having a lawn? And made a list. As I said, 45 hours a year on the mower. The opportunity cost here is high. My time is a scarce resource, and I'd much rather be doing something else. A lawn is beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. I can buy that. It's an acquired taste, but yes, a well cared for lawn can be beautiful. Lawns are conventional and accepted. There is pressure to conform and fit in. You probably won't upset your neighbors if you have a lawn. Lawns add uniformity to a neighborhood. Yards, like strip malls, look pretty much the same everywhere. National Geographic says, our sense of self is intimately entwined with that of place. Who we are is often inseparable from where we are. What happens to our sense of place, our sense of ourselves, when all places look alike? Does this homogeneity add to the greater good? Recreation. A lawn is a place to throw the ball for the dog or play catch with your kids. I totally buy this one, but I don't need an acre of grass for these activities. $360 a year on maintenance and gas. A commercial mower is more expensive to maintain, and all that power makes it a gas guzzler. That money might help the economy, but I'd rather put it toward my retirement. Does my buying that gas contribute to the greater good? Petroleum is a valuable resource. There are much better uses for it than my lawn. The mower emits 140 pounds of CO2 each year. Greenhouse gas emission is a negative externality of mowing. No question there. Noise, another negative externality. I wear hearing protection while I mow. I'd rather be listening to the birds than to the mower. A lawn is a monoculture, the cultivation of a single crop in a given area. According to a survey of research on the impact of grass lawns on biodiversity, studies show that many wildlife species are not found or are in low abundance in turfgrass, non-native dominated habitats, particularly our most sensitive and endemic species. And also, biodiversity loss can even affect important ecosystem services, such as removal of carbon dioxide and pollination services. More biodiverse ecosystems can uptake more CO2, a greenhouse gas, than ecosystems with less species diversity. Research by entomologist Doug Tallamy shows that native plants support significantly more insect species and biomass than non-natives. Why? Because they evolved together. For the most part, native insects in particular are not able to eat and digest non-native plants. In economic terms, when a plot of land contains a monoculture, it has lower productivity. A study by a university in the Netherlands likens ecosystems to the game known as Jenga, where wooden blocks are used to build a freestanding tower. Players then take turns removing blocks, and the last person to remove a block before the tower falls down loses. In this metaphor, species are represented by the blocks. Remove enough of them and the ecosystem collapses. By cultivating grass and removing everything else, I am contributing to the collapse of that tower. And when the tower collapses, our world collapses. Obviously, a monoculture hurts the greater good. Stormwater management. According to the Missouri Botanical Garden, the shallow root system of turf prevents the soil from maintaining its permeability, ability to soak up water, and in some cases may result in the formation of an impermeable clay shelf below the grass. Large expanses of irrigated and mowed lawn contribute to significant amounts of runoff that can contain pesticides and fertilizers. That is why the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, who has to handle all that runoff, is a partner in an alliance that offers rebates to homeowners for replacing their grass with, among other things, native plants. Like the removal of CO2 and the pollination mentioned already, this is an example of natural capital, which is, according to Wikipedia, the extension of the economic notion of capital, manufactured means of production, to goods and services relating to the natural environment. We are supporting natural capital when we support nature, and in turn, nature supports us. When we hurt nature, we are hurting ourselves. Looking at this list, it is clear to me that having a lawn is not in my best interest, or in the Earth's best interest. What are my options? First off, I decided to limit my work to the backyard. That way it's less likely to become an issue with the neighbors. Plus, if we eventually decide to change the front yard as well, we'll have some experience under our belts. I could just stop mowing it based on experience. What would happen is that dandelions and honeysuckle would take it over. True, it would no longer be a monoculture, but it would not increase the biodiversity by much because honeysuckle, being an invasive, does not support many native insects or animals. It would also be an eyesore, and my neighbors would be justifiably unhappy. I could replace the grass with native plants. This would be a case of human action modifying the physical environment. But of course, this plot of land was not originally turf grass, so it's not the first human modification. Horticulturalist Cindy Gilberg, who gave me a lot of expert help, told me that St. Louis was where the eastern deciduous forest met the prairie, and at the border there was savanna. So 200 years ago, my lot would have been a park-like area of widely spaced trees. If I were to go native, it would be reversing the original modification of the physical environment, which has been happening for decades in the U.S. and in a very big way. A 2005 study estimated that between 32 and 40 million acres, as much as 62,500 square miles, have been converted to suburban lawns in the U.S. Replacing the non-native grass with natives is appealing because, as stated earlier, native plants support native critters. But as Cindy pointed out, it's not sustainable if it eventually gets plowed under, and she has seen that happen when it's not done attractively. This leads to the option I choose: replacing most of the grass with a native plant garden. This option saves some grass for walking paths and for throwing the ball for the dog. It also takes care in placing the native plants so that there is order and form to the garden, not just a haphazard mix created by throwing seeds into the air. Of course, this will not create as much biodiversity as would replacing the whole lawn, but it is a good compromise. Here is my backyard from above, with the property line, some trees, and the vegetable garden outlined. That's a neighbor's house in the bottom left. Since our property line goes so close to their house, we give them more of a yard by only mowing to the dotted line. After Cindy walked around the yard, she suggested putting in a water feature here, in blue by the pin oak tree. The water could come out of a bubbler at the top of the slope, run down to a pool at the bottom, and then be pumped back to the top to repeat the process. The primary beneficiaries of this would be birds, who love moving water and need something to drink, especially in winter. There's a good video on YouTube on building a bubbler, and here is a list of the materials needed. Assuming I do all but the electrical work myself, it should cost around $300. Cindy and I also discussed having 2 beds for native plants, shown here in yellow. By leaving a strip of grass around the border of our property, the native plants don't go right up to our neighbors' yards. A similar strip of grass around the vegetable garden will make it easier to maintain the fence. The area closest to the house remains grass because that's the area the dog uses the most, and the path through the middle gives easy access to the woods out back. Here are some of the ground covers, plants, bushes, and trees that Cindy recommended planting. Based on the square footage of the planting beds, the cost of seeds and saplings comes to $508 without tax. The process of replacing a yard with native planting is covered in the sources listed at the end of this video, but here are the basic steps. Get the soil tested by a lab, such as at a university extension office. This determines the soil's fertility as well as measuring its pH, whether it is acidic or alkaline. A water infiltration test should be done also, and the soil's texture and structure should be determined. All of this information helps to determine where and what to plant. Kill the existing vegetation. One way to do this is to use a glyphosate herbicide such as Roundup. I don't want to use chemicals, so we'll probably kill the grass by smothering it for a few months, by putting down newspaper or cardboard and covering that with mulch. Since the best time to sow seeds is early winter, we will start to smother the grass in the spring. Except for a few trees, I decided to purchase seeds instead of seedlings. This means the garden will mature more slowly, but it is much less expensive. Clear the mulch and newspapers off the grass, now dead, and sow the seeds in November or December. In the spring, plant the tree saplings. The seeds sown in the early winter will start to germinate. Weeds grow faster than natives, so the first summer, mow the plot often enough to keep the weeds to a height of 6 to 12 inches. This will prevent them from growing tall enough to shade out the native seedlings. Careful weeding should be done too, and occasional deep watering. In the second summer, if weeds are a problem, mow to keep them to a height of 12 inches. Weed and water as needed. Once the native plants are established, Cindy recommends mowing once a year in early March. According to the Landscaping with Native Plants booklet, weeding becomes minimal as the garden matures. Maintenance, in general, slows down. The cost of a soil analysis is $36, so seed, soil test, and bubbler will hopefully come to less than $1,000. I can apply for a rebate from the Rainscape Rebates program mentioned earlier. Landowners are eligible to receive 75% of the cost of the work, up to a maximum of $2,000. Assuming that I sell the big mower once the native garden is complete, since I'll have so much less lawn to mow, even if I don't get a rebate, the garden will pay for itself in 3 years. This is a big project, and we won't do it all at once. Cindy recommended starting close to the house, so next spring we'll put the bird bubbler in. We'll also start smothering the grass near it, part of the western planting bed, to put some bushes in to give the birds cover. By November, the grass should be dead, and we should be able to start seeding. The following spring, we'll smother another chunk of grass and repeat the process. It'll take a while, but eventually, instead of being the sterile monoculture it is now, our backyard will be alive with birds, insects, flowers, trees, and butterflies. I can't wait.